In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, we are going to cover Richard Stayman's top 3 returning prospects to college basketball, because this college basketball season in 24-25 is one of the most exciting or highly anticipated college basketball seasons in recent memory. We have a good freshman class, but we don't want to forget about the top prospects who are returning. So in this episode, we're going to talk about Collin Murray-Boyles, Karaban, and Kwame Evans Jr. Stay tuned to hear Richard's thoughts and find out why those are his top 3 returning prospects. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe. And like I mentioned in the open, my co-host for the day is Richard Stayman, aka Mr. Mavs Draft. But before we get too deep into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And speaking of game time, I played full court basketball earlier today for the first time in 4 years. And that was after last week. Richard was back in town, and me, Richard, and my brother James, who you guys know, we played a little bit of half court at Lifetime Fitness. I think we were like 5-1, 6-1, something like that.
Yeah, we
So it was good to
dominated.
get back out there.
We dominated.
Yeah, we dominated. I mean, I can't say the competition was great, but I know playing full court today, and that's only my second time playing this year. I don't know how I didn't pass out. I know I'm gonna feel it tomorrow, but it's good to be back out on the court, man.
Yeah, hey, it's I can't believe we never played full together because we've run a lot of half court over the last like 2 years, like relatively a lot, and I could have sworn we snuck in a full court game there, but yeah, I think you might have ducked some of the full court once it returned from half to full.
No, last time I played full court, it was like in 2020, maybe. Yeah, I mean, people, it was at Lifetime, and they wanted us to wear masks, and they kept coming in telling guys you got to wear a mask. And I had Kay Felder on my team, who's a professional. You know, he was just fresh off of like winning MVP of the Chinese Basketball Association. So I was able to just run up and down the court, get some cardio, let him do all the scoring. So this time I played, and we didn't have enough guys at first, and it was 4-on-4 full court. That's brutal for someone that hasn't played in a long time. But I have fun. I think that, playing last week is it was fun, and I just want to get on the court and play as much as possible, because I got to get in shape, man. I got to get in shape, and I don't want to lift weights. So might as well hoop. But speaking about hooping, this year, like I mentioned, it's going to be a fun year in college basketball, in my opinion. We got a crazy deep freshman class. I think there's some good international prospects, but I think all the focus is going to be on college basketball this year. And every year around this time, we kind of forget about the guys that are returning to college basketball. And I think this is a strong group of players that are coming back to school. I think NIL played a major role in having a strong group of guys that are returning. And so I want to find out, who is your number one returning prospect for the 24-25 season?
Man, I've gone back and forth. Really, these 3 guys I think are pretty interchangeable on my board. I'll probably go with Kwame Evans. If that jumper comes around, I think he's the safest bet. He's somebody who creates activity on defense. His turnover issues, I think, were just him trying to drive and play in the middle. They all came in the middle of the court. And I don't think that's going to happen in the NBA, especially given the spacing. And then also his assigned role, which is mostly going to be perimeter-based and cutting-based, not so much trying to spin and get through traffic. That's how a lot of his turnovers came. But again, with just good defense, the jumper improving, he shot 80% from the line. Think there's reason to suspect that his jump shot will go up from the 20-something percent it was this last year up to the mid-30s, even if it's at like 33%. I'm pretty sold, but I feel like he's a smart player, plays defense, and can shoot. At 6'9", that's an ideal player that you easily make a role for in the league. Like, his jumper's come a long way, I think, over the last 2 years since he was at Montford.
I feel like you are the highest on him out of everybody that I've spoken with, just in the draft community, not necessarily NBA scouts, but in the draft community. He's the guy that you're really, really high on. I wouldn't say he's like your Mike Miles, but I know that you're pretty high on him. What would you say his greatest strength is right now, and the skill set that he'd be able to hang his hat on in the NBA?
I think it's quick decision making. When you are a forward that can make great decisions and play really smart defense without making much mistakes on either end in terms of just like coaches don't want to see those head scratching, like the stuff that'll take their hair out, right? They don't want to see that, especially from their non-primary players. That is the kind of player who he helps expand that margin for error for everybody else, where he can bail you out with hitting a jump shot. He's not going to put you in danger. You don't expect him to make a crazy highlight play or go for that every time where it works 1 out of 10 times. He plays very much within himself. And I just feel like the feel for the game is just that is the selling point. You can also shoot eventually, I think. Again, just those indicators are really good. And just that the analytics, I think, are going to catch up. Excuse me, his performance will catch up with the analytics that favor him.
And I think we talked about this before. Like when I watched him coming into his freshman year, I watched a lot of his film, and he just didn't pop out to me. Like I saw the long-term potential. I saw the versatility and the things that he does well, but it's kind of like listening to a song, in the first 5 seconds, whether you like this song or you want to skip it. And so for him, he just his film just didn't pop out. But I know, like I mentioned, that I had a long list of things that I thought he does well. The physical tools, of course. Is he 6'9", 6'10"? I mean, he has some wing skills. He can handle. He rebounds. Um, I feel like he can grab a rebound and go. And I see him as a guy that has a role as a connector. I was just a little bit concerned with the shooting. I thought sometimes he kind of shied away from physicality. And then I thought he was just like an average athlete. I didn't think he was like a great athlete. But I mean, overall, I do think that he made the right decision to come back to school, even though I thought somebody may have taken a chance on him in the late first round in the 2024 draft. So, all right, I want to ask you a little bit about the area that you want to see him show the most growth this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's shooting, right? Where, like I said, in at Montfort, shot, I don't remember exactly what the percentage was. I'm more focused on the looks of this, where he had a little hitch with his foot, where every time he had a tell, where it was never going to be a pump fake. He planted the way he planted his left foot was always a shot. There was no way to fake out of it. And he got rid of that. And I think his form has generally just improved. But also he shot like about 80, I think it was 80%. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but he shot very close to 80% from three, but 26% from three, I think. And if that can improve, say he stays, even if he goes down to like 78, 77 from the free throw line, even down to 75, I'd still buy it because we already have a year of 80%. We're right there. I think having him go improve that 3-point shot, make a few more, and he's in the 30s, like middle 30s is all he needs. He doesn't need to blow it out of the water. It'd be great if he did. But I think it's far and away the shooting. I think that is the only area of his game where you can say right now that's what limits him from getting on a floor in the NBA.
Yeah, he shot 26.7% from three, but 79.5% from the foul line. So that is really encouraging. I know there was a stretch. I'm trying to pull up. He had a stretch of games where I thought he was turning the corner. And then I think it was maybe it was one game. Maybe it was the USC game where he was like 6 of 8 from the floor. I do remember the 6 of 8 from the floor, 7 of 7 from the foul line. He had 22 points and like 5 blocks. I think it was something like that, either 5 blocks or 5 steals. But then he just finished like really, really slow. I know in the Creighton game, I was very like disappointed in his performance against Creighton. He played 38 minutes and only took 3 shots.
Yep. Yep.
He took three
They
shots.
deferred.
What's that?
They deferred so much in that game too.
Yeah.
Like I think everybody got passive.
Yep. And then against South Carolina, he took 3 shots. So he took 6 shots total in the NCAA tournament. And so, for him, I think I want to see him become a better shooter, but I think he needs to be more aggressive on the offensive end. Not saying that's going to be his role in the NBA, but 6 shots in 2 games, and maybe it was, part of being a freshman, but I thought there was I thought definitely there was a disappointing end to the season for him, but I thought he had a little bit of momentum coming into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with him is I ran this Bart Torvik query and like you can take some of that with a grain of salt, but I think with him, he had five, like the analytics again, just kind of putting that in perspective. He had a 5% block percentage, which is a really good number, honestly, for a freshman, especially as not a big, and then 3% for steal. And I looked just to see like who else fit that as a freshman in high major. And the list is really good. Like it is all truly good defenders that have, for the most part, found a role in the NBA. One of them's too young to really put any answer out. One is Tari Eason. He met this criteria. The others are Chris Singleton, who, although he was kind of a bust he was a first round pick, played good defense. And then Andre Roberson and Zion Williamson. He's the only one in the bunch that can shoot free throws. So that should be an indicator that there really is three and D upside for him.
What was the query that you pulled?
I just did high major freshmen that weren't 7 feet. So anything under 7 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And block percentage 5, steal 3. Those were his numbers.
And Alex Fudge wasn't on there?
I don't think so.
Wow.
Maybe it puts a default games. Maybe that's why, but no, it didn't change it. Yeah, Alex Fudge wasn't on there.
Yeah, because I remember like his block and steal rate his freshman year was pretty incredible. Actually, I think they're kind of similar. I think Kwame has more offensive game. Fudge is more athletic, but I know he was in it. He didn't play as many minutes, but I know like based if you use like block and steal percentage, his numbers were pretty much off the chart.
Oh no, I was gonna say I saw it. Yeah, he barely missed it on block percentage. Sorry.
Okay. All right, when we return, we're going to find out who is the number 2 rated returning prospect on Richard's. I don't know if it's a big board or just how he feels about prospects coming back to school for the 2024-25 season. But before we get into that, let's talk about Game Time, because Game Time is my favorite app when it comes to purchasing tickets. Game Time allows you to purchase tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have all-in pricing. All you have to do is toggle this feature, and it will show the total upfront. There are no surprise fees at checkout. Also, you get a panoramic view of the seat in the app before you buy, so there's no guessing where you're going to sit or what the view is. And they have the lowest price guarantee. If you find a cheaper ticket, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time's ticket coverage is the best. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, all you have to do is create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. Once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, you got to check out the Locked On NBA podcast, because there is no offseason in the NBA. And Locked On NBA provides you with basketball analysis from national and local experts, and you get it for 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or as entertained as Locked On NBA. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we talked about Kwame Evans Jr., the sophomore from Oregon, in the first segment. Second segment, who's your number 2 ranked prospect as far as returners to college basketball?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer for me. I think it's Collin Murray-Boyles. Like he's probably one of the most popular players on draft Twitter for the last really 8 to 9 months, and it's for good reason. We talk about defense with Kwame Evans. Collin Murray-Boyles is going to be the best defender in the draft, I think, not named Cooper Flag. I think he's somebody who, yeah, he's 6'7", doesn't really shoot. He took I think 10 threes or something this year. Not super worried about that at the moment. His archetype is weird, just 6'7", he's kind of a big, but he's the smartest defender you will watch this year, I think. But truly, in terms of mistakes, he is going to have the least amount per like just the volume, right? For him, he makes a living on the defensive end. He's very smart. He's a connector. He's smart on both ends of the floor. And I think that defense is going to get him on the floor right away.
Yeah, I feel like I got on early to him. I think it was maybe after his third or fourth game. I want to say it was against Georgia. I don't know how many games he played, but it was against Georgia where I was like, wait a minute, this guy is a legitimate NBA prospect. But he went through a streak. I want to say it was like 3 or 4 games where he shot like 80% from the floor, something like that. He just doesn't miss around the rim. He's a guy that I felt like early in, like once he started playing, because he missed like the first half of the season. I think he had like mono. But early when he started putting up numbers, I felt like draft Twitter wasn't a fan of him. They talked about what he couldn't do, his unique style of play in a sense, because he's like 6'7", 230. But as the season went on, I feel like a lot of people started to believe in him as a prospect. He averaged 10.4 points, 5.7 rebounds, 1.8 assists, which is shocking to me. He's a much better passer than the 1.8 assists per game. But he shot a little under 60% from the floor and 0% from three. And you mentioned that you're not really too concerned about that, but I want to like dig a little deeper in that. What position do you think he plays in today's NBA? And how much would you like to see him improve his 3-point percentage to feel real comfortable
Yeah.
with him in today's NBA?
Yeah, the position's really tough. I mean, at the end of the day in the NBA, just you can't have that many non-floor spacers. I feel like he's got to get it. He's just got to show that he can actually shoot. Like, I don't even care at this point about percentage. Like, show me the next step, which is for me, I think that's just show that you can shoot the ball consistently, get 100 threes up, right? Like, get 80, 75, whatever it is. Like, that's a big jump. But I do know that he's been working on his jumper a lot this offseason. And I just feel like that's it. But that's always missing because at the moment, I think the question comes down to which archetype is he? Is he an extremely undersized big that is forced to be a 5 at 6'7"? Or can he be a 4 that can play any position on the defensive end? And that's what I think he has to answer himself and go into that and say, all right, I'm going to lean into being the best undersized big that there is, or I'm going to make my game more modern and have big man traits at my size and dominate any position on the defensive end. And I think the latter sounds a lot better.
All right, question for you. Let's say he has like a Ryan Dunn type percentage from three. Do you think, and he still is productive? I mean, he gets what you expect for him to make, the jump that you expect for him as a sophomore, but it's not showing on the 3-point percentage. How much do you think that will impact his draft stock? And if so, do you think he should have left this year while his stock was high, where he could have went first round by not making a single three? Because I don't know if that will be the case as a sophomore if he
Yeah.
doesn't make a three, especially in this draft.
Yeah. His leash is a lot shorter, right? That margin for error just gets a lot more slim. I do think the big difference that I could see right away to dodge your question real fast is, I mean, he shot an okay percentage from free throw line, 67% on almost as much volume as Ryan Dunn took in 2 years. And
Yeah.
Ryan Dunn shot 52% for his career from the line. Now, if he does become Ryan Dunn, that's not a first round pick in this draft. If there is just no hope, if the shot didn't actually improve and he's not taking many, and he's kind of like Ryan Dunn airmailing a bunch of open threes, that's a massive red flag. And I
Yeah.
think he's second round pick. I think he made the right decision, but it depends on how well he shoots the ball. Because, like you said, a second year of being a non-shooter, it's cool the first year because like you have a little bit of leeway. You're new to the game or new to the scene in college. The second year, you're expected to be a lot better. And if you don't change your offense that much, like he would have to be elite everywhere else. I just don't even know how realistic of a jump he can make everywhere else to mask that 3-point shooting woes.
Yeah, totally different players, but it's almost like you could say the same for Dylan Mitchell. Like the first year as a
Yeah.
freshman, he didn't shoot the ball at all. I don't think he's made a three in his career. And I still think he had some buzz, comes back as a sophomore, doesn't show any improvement as a shooter. And now he's the guy that you can make a case and say, if you make a list of your top 50 returning prospects of college basketball, there's a world we live in where Dylan Mitchell may not be in a lot of people's top 50, 30. I mean, I put together a list of top 50 guys, and he wasn't a name that just popped off immediately, like, oh, this is a guy that is I mean, he can get drafted. Obviously, he has to show some improvements. But I just thought that there's a list of guys that I thought were better than him. Let's talk about CMB's offense. It's interesting to me that you brought up his defense first, and I know he averaged like a steal and a block per game, but he's fun to watch on offense. Even though he doesn't space the floor, his game is unique. I think he's a very, very good passer, very underrated passer. But his game is very, very unique. But what are your thoughts on him on the offensive end of the floor?
Yeah, I think he's a smart player. You've touched on it one already here, but also in your work on your Substack too and everything. Like that is a guy who like the assists per game so severely undersells what he does as a decision maker and with the ball in his hands, both off the catch and off the dribble, and creating a little bit for himself. I don't think he's much of a ball handler in that way, but I think the way he is just so smart, you will again like on the defensive end, obviously he's extremely smart, but to do it the same thing on the offensive end and know, all right, this is what I need to do. Know your role, how to maximize that. He knows how to maximize himself, and putting him with a coach who will do even more of that. Like put him with a guy who consistently does this with guys like him, with smart players, I think is Rick Carlisle. You're getting a really good player that I think if for the right team, that's somebody who can turn into a production per minute guy off the bench offensively while maintaining that defense.
Yeah, I was looking up the numbers. He had a 3 game stretch. Ole Miss, 8 of 11 from the floor. Vanderbilt, 14 of 17. And Auburn, 6 of 10. Like he had, and then the game before that, it was a Georgia game that I first noticed him. He was 7 of 9 from the floor. So you got 7 of 9, 8 of 11, 14 of 17, and 6 for 10. I'm not good at math, but that's like 6 or 7 shots he missed over 4 games while taking at least 30 or 40 attempts shots. I mean, that is impressive. But
Yeah.
offensively, he's fun to watch for me. Like I said, his game is unique. He has a unique build, like 6'7", 230. The next question I have for you is like, do you think his frame is going to turn some teams off? Because you can't put him in a box.
Yeah.
He's not Draymond, but Draymond is a guy that you couldn't really put in a box coming out of college. You didn't know what position he was. He did so many things well, but there were just some concerns about how it fit in the NBA, which is why he fell to the second round. And I think Draymond Green is going to end up being a Hall of Famer when you put his resume against others. But like, are there any concerns about his build and position?
Not really, honestly. I feel like you put him in an NBA strength and conditioning program, and I don't know what South Carolina's is like. I know some teams have it way better than others, and some teams don't even have them at all. I don't know what South Carolina's looks like, but I don't know. I feel like I've talked to multiple people about this. I think we all agree that if your issue is your body, if it's not a work ethic issue, if it's a you haven't seen the right light yet, that is the easiest problem to fix. And I
Mhm.
think just put him in with a nutritionist, right? Get him on the right programs and everything to get his body right. I think it's very easy fix.
But to me, he's a guy that I think you take away who he is or his strengths if you try to slim him down too much. He's
Sure.
not the same player. I think that's just his natural physique, and that's part of his uniqueness.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's pros and cons to having it. I think again, it just comes down to the team with how they want him to be. If they see him as like a little bit bigger, could help him fend guys off, or if they think slimming down would be more beneficial. I'm a little bit torn, but I think I'd be okay with him staying where he is.
Yep. All right, when we return, we're going to wrap this episode up with Alex Karaban, another guy that Richard is really high on. Well, before we talk about Caravan, let's talk about FanDuel because you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. That's because it's America's #1 sports book. Well, we all have something, a little something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit fanduel.com/locked on to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, last segment. Alex Karaban coming off a incredible year with UConn. And first of all, do you think UConn is a contender to repeat?
Yes. I
Okay.
one am not doubting Dan Hurley. And two, I feel like what they have on the wings, that's the kind of stuff that like you're gonna go far in March, and anything can happen in March. I just love that roster, man. How do you stop if you just have them both in the corners and you have a driving kick? How do you manage as a defense to handle both Liam McNeely and Alex Karaban? Like those are two first round picks in my eyes. I think that's extremely tough. And like the way 3-point shooting has continued to impact college basketball more and more every year, they have a little bit of a lag behind the NBA in that way. I feel like UConn can never be ruled out. I think they're like a staple for the foreseeable future as a second weekend team, no matter what.
Off topic. Did Dan Hurley use the Lakers? Or
Oh, 100%. He won that so well. I mean, I don't feel like there was ever interest from him. I feel like that was purely leverage.
Yeah, I mean, it's like JJ Redick is the favorite. Oh no, it's Dan Hurley. Oh yeah, and then I think, especially with the whole Woj connection, Woj wrote his dad's book, broke the story. Sham said it was JJ, then Woj says it's Hurley. I mean, I just feel like that was very strategic to get a little bit more money there.
Yep.
And so, I mean, the Lakers are a great organization to use for leverage because it's worked for quite a few people. All right, can you tell me a little bit about Alex's his strengths and why you think his strengths make him a first round pick?
Yeah, I feel like his touch is really good at the rim, so he's not just your normal shooter. He's also very smart. The way he moves off the ball, he doesn't move just to move. Like he moves with a very real purpose, and he knows where the holes are on the perimeter. So I think that helps a lot. And then on top of that, he's a fantastic shooter who the form is very weird, I would say. It doesn't look always smooth, but the touch is outstanding. Like he's got arguably the best shooting touch in the class. And one other thing I also really like is just how quick he gets into the shot. Like the way he catches and immediately goes into his motion. I haven't seen anybody faster from last year's cycle when he was still in the mix. I don't know if I'm going to see anybody faster this year, barring any changes to his form.
I noticed that you really prefer smart players, which is fair. Like I guess we all kind of have a aesthetic that we lean towards in a sense. Like for me, I like shot makers. I like guys into the shot clock, get out the way, go get a bucket, which I think is kind of like what the NBA is about. And you can make a case and say we saw it in the Olympics to where at times, well, we end up winning games because we just said, all right, let's just go get a bucket, forget the offense. And I know not everybody is Steph or, the type of players that can do that, but that's just kind of my preference, guys that can create at the end of the shot clock. But I notice you really, really favor guys that are smart. And Alex Karaban is a guy that is the epitome of a smart player.
Can I just defend that real fast? For
Yeah.
role players, I
Yeah.
think if you are not a smart player, like if you are somebody who has turnover issues and you're making crazy decisions and your expected role as a role player, like I won't name any names, but been some guys drafted in the second round purely off of hype who are projected to be role players, but still think they're the stars. I do not like that. If
Yeah.
you're looking at the top 10, you better be able to make a shot. Like you better be able to bail the offense out, go get a bucket within 5 seconds of the offense, go isolate and do that, go ISO. And I think there is very real value on that. But when you're comparing somebody like trying to think like Jordan Crawford versus Alex Karaban, I'm taking Alex Karaban's archetype every time, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at with it is if you're like Alex Karaban will never be more than the fourth option in the league, and that's okay because he's very good at as a fourth or fifth option. I'd rather have someone like that than somebody who is a six man but thinks they're the best player on the team.
Jordan Crawford is one of my favorite players
He
to
was
watch.
awesome. He was awesome. I didn't mean
No,
to
no, no,
not paint
no. But
out
it's
wrong.
fair because like if you ever watch him play in a pickup, you'd be like, this dude is better than whoever else
Yep.
because
Like
nobody
he's super talented. I
nobody
think
can guard
those
him.
guys are more talented than the players like Jordan Crawford. I would say pound for pound, is probably more talented at basketball than Alex Karaban, but
Yep.
one of them contributes more to winning, right? So
Yep. And that's the fun part about scouting is like I went to get off subject here. I went to Monaco last year with my dad, and we watched Risa Shea. And I was like, this guy's gonna be at the time. I was like, he's gonna be a top 5 pick. My dad is like, what? He saw nothing, and I'm trying to explain to him like he can play with anybody. And I'm not a big Risa Shea fan, but I was like, you see the positional size, you see he's defending, he can knock down shots, but it was hard explaining to my dad like why is this guy better than Kenny Lofton Jr. because my dad watches Kenny Lofton Jr. and he's like, this dude's getting buckets. But that's like one of the challenging things with scouting, at least not as you've been in it for a while, but in the beginning, how a guy's game translates. And so sometimes being a really gifted scorer doesn't translate. And back to what you said about guys that are role players that are being smart, I think that the only way you can be a role player and not have like a crazy IQ is if you make up for it with like outlier athleticism.
yep.
And if you're not like an outlier athlete where you can just, I mean, I don't want to say dumb, but you don't play smart, but your athleticism can like close gaps. Like you can gamble on defense and then you have the athleticism to get back into play. But I do think that if you are not like a crazy gifted athlete and you're a role player, you have to like be really smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And like to tie it back to Caravan, I mean, you just won't see the guy make mistakes. Like he averaged under turnover last year. Like the way he's always in rhythm, like he knows what his role is and he's always ready to do it. And I think there's so much value to that, especially like in a league where you just cannot have enough shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that's something where if you put him on, he's going to get drafted probably in the middle of the first round. That's a team that's in the play and that probably needs a slight bump in shooting. That's your answer. Like that, I think next year with junior year Karaban, excuse me. I think that's somebody who is going to have the equivalent of a free agent signing. That's not like the minimum.
All right. How do you think he'll obviously you're very high on him, you think he's a first round pick, but are there any concerns about how he'll play with an expanded role? Because you think he's number 1 on the scouting report?
Absolutely not. I don't think he's number two. I don't think he's number three
No, I'm
either,
talking about
even
in
this year.
college this
I
year.
know. Yeah, yeah. I don't think he is. I don't think he is. I think that's a very easy, like, and I only think that because there's nothing advanced about his game that as a team, you just make sure if you're in zone, it's a little bit, you have to change, I feel like a little bit more of how you are attentive to his spots. But in man to man, I mean, the assignment's very easy. It's just don't like lose him. That's the assignment isn't hard, right? You don't have to worry about like make him go left when he's isolated because the volume is so low. He's mostly an off-ball guy, and I think those guys are just lower on the scouting reports. There's just less that you have to worry about on a like per possession basis. If that makes sense.
So let's say you're coaching against UConn. Who is the number 1 guy on your scouting report that you feel like makes their offense go?
I mean, there's a few guys. I gotta look at their roster again. I mean, adding like a guy like Aiden Mahaney,
Yeah.
I almost get that name wrong every
Mhm.
time. Like he's somebody who I think is a little bit tougher because he can dribble and create his own shot and he can play make. I think someone like him is a little bit tougher on the scouting report. I don't know if he'll start or what, but someone like that. Again, I would have to look at that roster. So I'm drawing a little bit of a blank, but maybe for UConn, maybe third. I would say probably third. I think
I
Liam goes above him personally.
I think you're coming into the season, the first few games, and you're like, we can't let Karaban get loose. Last year we had to stop clinging. We had so many other guys where he was able to get good looks. But I think this year with his experience, I think he's the number 1 name on the scouting report. So I'm curious to see how he plays when the team's best defender is probably, at least at the beginning of the season, he's going to draw the best defender and he's going to be the top name on the list. So I'm curious to see how he plays when the defense is kind of focused on him.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the roster. You might be right. I mean, they lost a ton of talent. Even though they're getting some of the guys back, a lot of them are freshmen or I mean, Ada Mahaney's one of them. Terrace Reed, I don't think is at the top. Like, you might be right. That is
Transfers.
second or
Yeah.
third.
Yeah. So I think he's going to be
So in
number one.
theory, that sounded better than it actually was.
Yeah. All right. What do you think he needs to show this year to maybe bump his draft stock?
The athleticism's not great. I don't think that's something he's going to be able just to fix. And also, this is his fourth year of college. He redshirted his freshman year. So I think that's something. But really, for me, I mean, the defense. Like, show that you can be a good defender and utilize the length, because now we know he has a 6'11" wingspan, which I feel like came out of absolutely left field.
Yeah.
I think that is something where if he can prove that he knows how to utilize that and make his length effective, that's big, because he's not just a shooter at that point. Maybe there are shades of some defensive ability, just like he's harder to shoot over, and maybe you look for it a little bit more now. I don't think there's any necessarily one major thing, because his on-ball game is kind of limited, actually pretty limited. And I think that's where my thing is like, now you know the teams like your length, use it and be a much better defender, or at least get those stats improved. Play the passing lanes better, whatever it is, just be active on the defensive end.
Yeah. My last comment is I'm real curious to see, just because I had this conversation with an agent, not an agent, I'm sorry, a trainer, and he, is doing what a lot of trainers are doing at this time of year. Oh, my guy's lottery, my guy's this and that. And it was a transfer, and the guy blamed the previous school why. So anyway, I was like, look, your player is going to be a junior. Looking back at last year's draft, everybody that was a junior or older absolutely dominated. Like, Jalen Tyson was a junior. He averaged like 19 a game. We saw Edey average like 25 and 12. Dalton Connect had a monster year. Devin Carter, monster year. Deron Holmes, monster year. And I wonder, can you be an upperclassman with 3 or 4 years of experience and be drafted in the first round without absolutely dominating college basketball? And so that's my question for Karaban. Like, can he just show flashes? Because I'm just off the top of my head from previous years, from Keegan Murray to other guys, they absolutely dominated.
You caught me speechless. I mean, I don't have a counter. Like, I think you're right. Like, I'm just trying to find guys that maybe were juniors. I mean, in college, like, this is a tough, like, you are right. The junior year breakout, like freshman to sophomore is a jump. I think sophomore to junior is where the volume stays the same, but you got way more efficient and teams didn't know how to stop you. I mean, another one was Malachi Flynn. I thought he might have been a little bit younger, but like, I really don't have a counter to that. That is a really good point, in that junior year is kind of make or break.
Yeah, your freshman year, all you need is flashes. Junior year, dominate. But you know what? That's a subject or a podcast episode we can talk about at another date. But yeah, I just wanted that was my concern about Karaban. Well, that wraps up this episode. This was a fun one, man. I hate that we ran out of time. We could have went on forever. But that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Now check out the Locked On NBA Podcast, where the season never ends, providing you national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to the Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't have to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with my co-host Richard Stayman. He gave his top 3 returning prospects. Stay tuned, we're going to have more episodes. There's at least 50 guys, not all 50 will be drafted, but there's at least 50 guys that I think are legitimate potential draft picks that return to school, and we're going to try to cover them all before the season starts. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with Richard Stayman, and we are out of here.